Hello and welcome to Calstock on the banks of the River Tamar, and we're just in Cornwall here, but across the other side of the river is Devon, and there's been a settlement here since Bronze Age times, and we're about 5 miles to the south of Tavistock and about 10 miles to the north of Plymouth. And this lovely magnificent bridge, this structure, this railway bridge behind me, was constructed between 1904 and 1907, and the architect was local to the area. He was called John Lang from Liscard, and it's 120 feet high above the river, and there are 12 60 feet spans which cross from one side to the other. It's an absolutely magnificent structure, and there were 11,148 concrete blocks went into making it up. It's amazing, a truly amazing structure close up. And the home that I'm going to talk about is Cotehele, which is just about 1.25 miles from here. And it was the home for several centuries to the Edgecombe family. And the main house was built in 1458. And they also owned a site near to the Rame Peninsula, Mount Edgecombe, and the Mount Edgecombe House. But it's a really lovely structure with beautiful gardens. So I hope you're going to enjoy the video. I'm beginning my visit here in the garden at Cotehele House, a National Trust property, which is about 1 mile or so's walk from Calstock and just over 1 mile from the railway station. I remember as a youngster, as a family, we would catch the train from Devonport out here to Calstock on the Tamar Valley Line, and it's a beautiful walk along the River Tamar, this lovely riverside walk, and then climbing up through the woods you reach this majestic garden and this medieval manor house. It's beautiful. This view of the medieval stew pond and the 15th century dovecote has always been one of my favourites. Exotic and tender plants thrive in the mild climate in this part of Cornwall, and there's something to see throughout the year in this garden, with rhododendrons and azaleas being a particular highlight. The manor house was built by the Edgecombe family in the late 15th century, and it stands at the head of a valley garden which drops down steeply to the River Tamar. From this view you can just see a glimpse of the graceful Edwardian railway viaduct that was constructed between 1904 and 1907 to take the railway across the River Tamar. This magnificent railway viaduct at Calstock was constructed between 1904 and 1907 using some of the most up-to-date technology of that era. It's the largest viaduct in Britain to be constructed of concrete blocks, and it's created a single-track crossing which is around 800 feet long and 120 feet high. This photograph that was taken in June 1906 shows the viaduct under construction, and Goss's boatyard can be seen there on the opposite bank. As I mentioned in my introduction, a total of 11,148 concrete blocks were used during the construction of the viaduct, and these were cast in a temporary yard that was set up on the Devon bank of the river opposite the village. Each of the 12 arches has a 60-foot span, and this makes for a really imposing and impressive structure. The project for building the bridge was given to a relatively inexperienced contractor at that time, John Lang of Liscard, but it was Richard Church and William Galbraith who deserve the credit for having produced a most beautiful and graceful design. Some of William Galbraith's other projects included the Kew Railway Bridge across the River Thames in London, and closer to home the Meldon Railway Viaduct that was built in 1874 by the London and South Western Railway across the West Oakmont River Valley near Oakhampton. Well, I'm now at Calstock station, which was opened in 1908, and it was opened by the Plymouth, Devonport and South Western Junction Railway, and it opened shortly after the magnificent Calstock Viaduct, just over to my left, was completed. Building work took nearly 4 years to complete. It's 120 feet wide, crossing the River Tamar, and it brings trains from Devon into Cornwall. And it has a magnificent 12 60-foot wide arches. It's an incredible structure. And this is part of the Tamar Valley Line, so trains are heading to Gunnislake in that direction and back to Plymouth in that direction. And originally, when the railway opened in 1908, it carried traffic from Beer-Alston through to Callington, but the Callington part of the line closed in 1966. The viaduct did have a hoist system where wagons could be lowered down to the quay below for goods to be loaded onto boats, and likewise when the wagons were lifted there was a connection to the goods yard just over to my right here, where goods could then be unloaded and put onto trains, but all of that was dismantled back in the 1930s. The station is well used with just over 30,000 passengers a year. In its day, Calstock station was really busy with a whole range of passenger trains, as well as dealing with parcels and livestock and horse boxes and prize cattle vans. It was a busy place. There would have been a very active goods yard, which was over on the right hand side of the picture here, but it closed in February 1966. The railway from Plymouth to Gunnislake is supported and marketed by the Devon and Cornwall Rail Partnership under the banner of the Tamar Valley Line. The station is on a very steep curve, and I remember as a youngster when I used to come here, listening for the screeching of the wheels as the train approached, and you'd see the train at the very last minute as it pulled into the platform. And you can hear a train as it approaches from Gunners Lake, pulling into the station here at Calstock. Going back to the days when I lived in the West Country, I always enjoyed visiting the Tamar Valley, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty, and to Calstock itself, which is such an attractive village on the banks of the River Tamar. There is evidence that the Calstock area has been inhabited since the early Bronze Age, and the settlement around Calstock was mentioned in the Domesday Book and was part of the Earldom of Cornwall. By the middle of the 19th century, the quay stretched for nearly 3/4 of a mile, and during the 1890s, there were about 20 cargo ships operating on the river. In fact, when you look at the area these days, it's hard to believe that it was such a bustling port. In fact, it was to become a popular tourist destination, and paddle steamers would bring tourists up from Plymouth. And in fact, Queen Victoria and her family made a trip along the Tamar in 1856. But it was the completion of the railway in 1908 that brought an end to the immense importance of Calstock as a river port. I'm ending my visit to Calstock by returning to Cotehele, and I'm on Cotehele Quay, which is on the banks of the River Tamar, and it was once a busy working quay where goods were shipped to and from Plymouth, but these days it's an historic site for everyone to enjoy. There is a very attractive walk from Calstock Station out here to Cotehele Quay. It's just over a mile each way. It's mainly flat on quiet country lanes, but there is one steep section as you walk up through the woods. But the views at the top over the river and the viaduct along with the valley below make it all worthwhile. It really is the perfect place to end my visit to the wonderful village of Calstock, along with its spectacular railway viaduct and this beautiful vintage home and estate at Cotehele.